I've mentioned many times before, appearing on a Royal Command performance, a Royal Variety performance, is something rather special. And it is a chance, if you are a megastar or indeed starting out at the very start of your career, to shine on a worldwide stage and, more importantly, meet royalty afterwards, which can inject so much into your career later on, or indeed as a memory for yourself or your family. It's one of those magical, true moments. But what's interesting is, behind the scenes of the Royal Variety performances always have some rather interesting tales. And this particular one, well, really, this was the very final performance of a much-loved variety artiste. So much so that the royals got involved towards the end. Rather sad royal scandal, some might say. As ever, let me explain. Morning, how are you? Nice to see you today. As ever, thank you so much. We're on the back of a bus. We're going to be changing very soon. Just thought to give you a quick wave. We're on our way. It's a busy day today. Yes, well, I know you appreciate that. I can see that. Put your tea down while I'm talking to you, at least. I wish I had a cup of tea. Don't get your flask out on the bus day with all the potholes and the rolls jumping about. But this story really is a fun story, let me tell you, because it's all about someone who entertained people for decades. And as I said, the Royal Variety performances back in the day, particularly in the highlighted days of 30s, 40s, 50s and 60s, really the artists were picked, really, if the royals liked them. Would they entertain? The idea was by royal command. The Royal Variety performance today is based on whether the channel that is putting it on, mainly commercial channel ITV, whether they can get ratings. That's why you see lots of pop stars, because the artists basically pay for their time on the show. It's as simple as that. I'm not dressing it up, that's the deal. And when you think about it, it kind of makes sense in this cash-strapped times. But really, would you imagine that William and Catherine wanted to sit through various artists? Not so. Back in the golden days of, say, the Queen or the Queen Mother, the Duke of Edinburgh or King George, the artists were picked because the royals, Her Majesty, His Majesty, had shown an interest in that particular artist. This one, though, had a tragic turn for the worst. As ever, let me explain. Took place on the 1st of November 1948 at the world-famous London Palladium, put together by the supreme team of Moss Empires, and it literally was a spectacular event. Not forgetting, of course, it's only a few years after the finish of the Second World War. Now, the biggest star on the bill that year was a man who'd really created a phenomenon at the London Palladium only a year before. That is, of course, the brilliant Danny Kaye. Now, Danny was a huge favourite with the British monarchy. The Queen Mother, Queen Elizabeth, and of course King George loved him, alongside the princesses, who actually went to the Palladium on a number of occasions to see the show. They loved him that much. Interestingly, Danny came over to do the Royal Variety, but apparently had to fund the £12,000 out of his own salary because he was working on a film out in Hollywood, and apparently that would be the cost of the stoppages. But he realised the power of appearing in front again of British royalty. Strange to think, isn't it? Today the studio would pay you to do that. Then, of course, they were all powerful and didn't necessarily care what, movers and shakers you were moving in. It was all about the bottom dollar for them. Now, on the night, as I say, the particular show is slightly famous, not just for the brilliant Danny Kaye, but you will recall a very young 12-year-old Julie Andrews singing the national anthem to their majesties in the royal box. But what you don't know is this. You see, behind the scenes, there was a terrible situation developing because the brilliant comedian, author, songwriter, actress Nellie Wallace was one of the big star guests. And sadly for Nellie, this would prove rather fatal. Apparently during the rehearsals, she said she didn't feel particularly well, but like the trooper that people are in the world of show business, she decided to carry on. Now again, here's where it gets really interesting, because during the performance she again felt very ill. Her Majesty and of course His Majesty had no idea. They were big fans of Nellie Wallace, let me tell you. Now, the moment that she got off stage from her show-stopping performance and had the house literally crying with laughter, she collapsed in the wings and was taken directly off to hospital because they were very concerned naturally. Now, nobody told Queen Elizabeth or indeed King George because they didn't want to alarm them. Think about the time, 1948. It was only afterwards that Queen Elizabeth found out and then put a personal call in to the hospital to see how Nellie Wallace was. More importantly, she checked up on her every single day, sent over, of course, some wonderful fruits and stuff like that from the royal chefs. Basically, she wanted to go and see her, but didn't want to alarm everybody because Nellie didn't want that attention. You can understand being a performer, wanted to bounce back, didn't want many people knowing, in fact. Sadly, several days later, Nellie Wallace passed away, and this was her very final appearance on a stage. Some say it's rather fitting. According to a very well-placed source, the Queen Mother and the King were visibly moved by the departure, sadly, of Nellie. And of course, it put a slight dampener on what had been a spectacular night. More importantly, there was a wreath sent to the funeral. No name on it, but everybody knew who it was from. Isn't that a really nice gesture, that you find these things out all these years later? Proving, of course, that the royals do things with class, decorum and style. It doesn't always have to be about glittering showbiz. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.